Hello, I'm Tom McDonald with the CIO Executive Council, and welcome to the October 11th, 2018 edition of the Power Hour. Today's episode is Organizing for Digital. Typically, our Power Hour webcasts are reserved exclusively for council members, so we're particularly excited to include non-members today by live streaming this session on Twitter. You can follow along on Twitter at CIO Online or at the council's Twitter handle at CIOEC. And you can post any comments or questions you might have along the way by using the hashtag Organizing for Digital, and we'll be sure to keep an eye out for that and see if we can work those into the conversation today. And now I'd like to introduce our special guest host. She's one of the most widely followed voices on the role of the CIO, as well as a leading CIO columnist. She's the author of 2 books on IT leadership, The CIO Paradox, and most recently, Be the Business, CIOs in the New Era of IT. Her weekly newsletter, The Heller Report, has become a must-read for IT executives. And she's also the CEO of Heller Search Associates, a CIO recruiting firm. And on top of all that, she's even one of the founding members of the council itself. We're so glad to have her joining us on the Power Hour once again. Please welcome Martha Heller.
Thank you, Tom, for that gracious introduction. For years, I've been trying to get Tom to include something about my physical beauty in the introduction, but he's resisting. I don't know why. Very exciting to be here with all of you today. I will caution you that this is the first time I've done a video live streaming event, and I do feel that an alternate career for me could have been to be a Broadway star. And so this might be my opportunity to launch that career. I may break out into song, who knows? So I just want everyone to be prepared for that. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. I'd like to open this discussion by talking about the industrial economy. So the industrial economy has been with us since, I don't know, late 18th century, early 19th century. And in the industrial economy, we had lots of owned assets, bigger footprint, bigger plants, more teams, bigger teams, walls around our companies, walls around our departments to foster innovation, or competition rather, and we use technology to do what we had always done, but do it faster, cheaper, and better. Well, we've been in the digital economy now for like 30 seconds or so, and in the digital economy, everything is different. We want fewer owned assets. We want small, nimble, cross-functional teams. We want to pull down the walls around our companies, and we want to pull down the walls around our departments. And we're no longer using technology simply to do what we always did, but do it faster, cheaper, and better. We're actually using technology to change the very business that we're in. So this change, which I don't think we can understate, as big as the change from agrarian to industrial has been, the change from industrial to digital may even be bigger than that. So with such a massive change, that causes us to ask some questions. With technology transforming the very fundamentals of our business, what does that mean for IT? Where does IT stop and product engineering start? Where does IT stop and marketing start? What is IT's role in innovation? Who is IT's customer? What is digital and who's leading it? Well, I can't answer all of those questions, but what I can do is address the last one, what is digital? It's no wonder that it's a question, because when it comes to digital, executive committees are not always on the same page. Is digital a function that requires resources? Is it a set of technology solutions? Is it a P&L? Is it a strategy? Do we need a chief digital officer? What's that person's background? Where do they report? One thing that I'll put a stake in the ground and say that I feel digital is a transitional concept that will go away. Let's all meet back here in 5 years, and digital will be in the past, because digital is just the way we live now. We don't have a chief business officer. We don't have a chief oxygen officer, nor will we have a chief digital officer, because we're just living in a digital world. We will all someday be able to let that go as a concept, but we can't do that today because we need it to define this change that we're in. So let's define digital first by defining what it is not. Digital is not using technology to do what we've always done faster, better, and cheaper. Digital is a full-scale transformation of every facet of our business. And I don't know if you can see this on the camera, I'm pounding the table when I say that. So if digital is a full-scale transformation of our business, then our IT operating model has to change. The way we organize IT vis-a-vis the other business units needs to change. If technology has become the business that we're in, then we need to find ways to distribute technology investment decisions, development, innovation, adoption across the business. But saying that we're taking down the silos and we're taking down the walls, those are pretty words. But we have to build something. It can't be a free-for-all. We need org charts and business cards and reporting structure and accountability and bonuses and compensation. But this new thing that we're building for this brand new business that we're in looks nothing like anything we've seen before. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is how are we organizing for digital? We're going to talk about agile development. We'll talk about business outcomes. We're going to talk about product management as an approach. We will even talk about the future of the IT organization. And we're very lucky today because both of our panelists have promised me that they know all of the answers, that they know it all. We're not going to leave here until we figure all of this out. So I'm delighted to introduce Kim Snipes, who is CIO of USAA, and Dave Castellani, who is Business Information Officer at New York Life. Welcome, panelists. You were worried there that I was never going to stop talking, right? But I did. I've stopped. So anyway, why don't we start, Kim, why don't we start with you and just tell us a little bit about your role and about USAA.
Absolutely. So USAA, I'll start there. USAA, we really think of ourselves as a relationship company at the end of the day, a very special relationship company to our military community. And I personally am in a role of the CIO, though, again, I've seen roles, those names used differently at different places. For me, and at USAA, and it really gets to that whole changing the way we're organized for the digital transformation, really encompasses all the development, all the portfolios of development across all the lines of businesses within USAA, which includes property and casualty, banking, wealth management, investment, brokerage, all of that, and of course the corporate functions as well.
Okay, thank you. Dave, a little bit about New York Life and your role there?
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, I agree with your opening comments there about the change that's ahead of us. I'm the Business Information Officer, as noted. I actually chose that term instead of CIO to actually make the business connection first and foremost. Technology departments are changing, and they need to change with more business proximity in terms of the work we're doing and the like. So it is a technology function. I run technology for the company today. But as I said, that's a role that's going to change and develop, especially with a 173-year-old mutual life insurance company where the change is upon us.
Excellent. So sticking with you, Dave, it's a big question, but when you and your executive peers toss around the concept of digital, what are you all talking about?
I think it's really sort of a misused catch basin, if you will, for everything that we want to modernize. We're trying to get more around what is the customer journey as the digital initiative. You can take everything that you currently do today and digitize it. Does that mean you're digital? It just means you've modernized, you perhaps have streamlined, maybe you've taken some cost out, but you haven't changed your go-to-market strategy. You haven't changed the customer experience. You haven't impacted client retention and happiness, and you haven't really impacted the P&L to a sustainable way or a sustainable effect. So I think the definition is really quite important in the end, is that, again, we cast about these broad terms, but what does it mean? How do people get up in the morning and act in a more digital way that's actually going to impact the P&L?
So for you, for New York Life, digital is customer engagement, or at least that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and you have multiple customers. We have agents that we serve. We also have consumers. And so, there are multiple constituencies as well as other third-party distribution agents that we have.
Okay, thank you. Kim, how about for you? What do the folks at USAA think of when they think of digital?
Yeah, we really think of it as a holistic, I'll say, mindset. And I agree with the what was said before, which is it really is becoming just such a overused, kind of used in so many different ways of a word. But I will tell you, for us, it really represents a mindset shift, which is how are we absolutely delivering to our members, and that's what we call our customers. How are we thinking differently about what we call those experiences? How are we thinking about creating technology enablement in a way that allows us to be extremely nimble in the way we think about those experiences? And just as importantly, how do we wrap an ecosystem around that? Meaning, you cannot be thinking digital in a world where your HR functions are still the way it was in the industrial era. The way you think about your finances, everything about the enterprise has to wrap around this concept in order for you to really bring it to life. And so we really take it as a full-scale transformation, cultural mindset type of effort.
So sticking with that concept of cultural mindset, let's just talk more broadly about USAA in general before we get to the IT organization. How are you driving that mindset shift across the company?
Well, the great thing about USAA is we were, as I call it, we were born out of a mission. The whole reason we are a company, an association, is because we realized there was a need that was not being met for the military community. That's what we were born out of. And every day we spend time thinking about, are we fulfilling the mission to our members? So we've always been member focused, but I think we're realizing what the members expect in the way of experiences and capabilities has radically changed, right? Before, in a company such as ours, you might talk about a claim, or you might talk about a banking account. We don't talk about that. We talk about what are those experiences? How are we helping people have a new habit around savings? How are we thinking about making it so that they are healthier and their environment is such that they don't need to think about claims? What are those digital experiences? I hate to, again, I'm probably going to overuse the word myself, but it starts with recognizing that is really what we're delivering to our members, not those kind of fundamental building blocks, if you will, of insurance products and banking products.
So you have shifted into the customer experience business.
For sure. I think we've always been there. I think we realize now what that really means, what we think our members mean by that now, in the way of more than just a banking account. It's the experience that we provide them is what they're really looking to us to have.
Excellent. Thank you. Dave, how about you broadly at New York Life? How old is New York Life?
173 years.
Okay, so that's,
I've only been there for half of it.
Good. I wasn't going to say anything. How are you shifting the culture toward, whether it's customer experience, customer engagement? That's a shift, not just for the folks who have come in the last couple of years, but how about all those executives who probably have worked there for quite some time?
Yeah, and agents who are used to selling and operating in a certain fashion. We're looking at this in a bifurcated fashion, actually. We have 4 million policyholders today who don't care about digital. They're actually content with the delivery mechanism that they have in place. They don't really want to do much more in the way of self-service. At the margin, they do. But it's really about what's the next 173 years at New York Life going to look like. And for that, the go-to-market strategy is going to be very different. The customer engagement is going to be very different. And what I mean by bifurcated, we've got a what I'll call a NewCo mindset, a new company mindset around digital initiatives, rather than trying to retrofit everything to the existing system in a digital fashion. We're thinking more of what's the new engagement model and what are the new attendance systems that will go along with that, so that we're actually modernizing the old legacy environment to drive efficiency and some self-service, but a completely different new model for new consumers.
What's the most challenging part of the cultural change that you run into?
Probably around engaging consumers in a different way. I'll use an example, which is mobile first. I think this is often confused. People will say, well, we'll take our existing platform and we'll adapt it to the device. It's not a mobile first strategy. A mobile first strategy starts with the device and works backwards to all the different systems that have to support it. And actually reaching people to think that way is a very, very big challenge. So it's reimagining work in environments in ways that if you've been doing something a certain fashion for 30 years is a little bit difficult for people to comprehend.
So when you talk about reimagining work, that applies to the IT organization as well. If
It does.
I don't own it, I can't manage it. My job as a technologist and what I'm working on is a project. I'm responsible for an application. My application has users, and I'm not particularly connected to those users, but I am connected to the application. I mean, this is a long-held zeitgeist in an IT organization. What is the mindset you want to shift IT to, Dave, and how are you doing that?
There's a little bit of build less and manage more. Just look at CRM systems, the way they're put together today. It's largely out of the box, cloud-based. Your configuration would be certainly to the needs of New York Life, but after that, it's owned and operated by a third party, often. And the same could be true with ultimately what will happen with ERP systems down the line. So you've got an attitude change here which says, I'm used to building things. And I like doing that and like the engineering aspect of it. Don't take that away from me, where the market's shifting in an entirely different direction, all for the good. So we have to have people rethink their priorities and their behaviors within the company. And the second thing is, importantly, is no aspect of technology should be done within our organization that doesn't have a business value. And that's not always been the case. I'm sure it's not just true for New York Life, it's probably true in other places, but you have to be fully aligned to the business need and business requirements and not just be doing technology for technology's sake. So yes, there's a huge change management element in that, but it's partly in how you hire and how you reward and how you train and develop. And I think over time, people begin to cotton on to these new ways.
And Martha, I'd love to jump in on that. One way that I saw at USA we're looking is we start by thinking about everything as an experience. So we start in the business and we say, what are those experiences? Again, not a checking account, but what is that experience? I want to be able to move my money. I want to be able to pay my bills. I want to be able to save, etc. So we start there and then we align everything. And I mean the business, the technology organization around those experiences. So if I tell my teams, hey, we are now almost dotted line to the old, I'm tied to an application, I'm tied to certain technologies. You are tied to an experience. And therefore, with that experience, my teams talk about what are the business outcomes of that experience? And they are building to that experience, the solutions. You can't get away from the fact that there are applications, there is infrastructure, there are those things. But we really made that more of the dotted line, and the hard line is to the experience. And that's where we really saw ourselves be able to mentally shift and think in a different way in our IT organization.
So the teams, someone's got to be developing and delivering technology in there somewhere.
Yeah.
The teams that organize to develop and deliver technology, what are they called?
We have the agile teams.
Yeah.
And so we have, for example, an experience owner is on the business. You could think of it as a product owner, basically, but you have an experience owner. We align a certain number of agile teams to that experience. And we really, even though I have responsibility for all the delivery, at the end of the day, those teams are taking very strong direction from that product owner and that experience owner. And that is where they have 1 to n number of agile teams. We are doing agile at scale. And that is how we are creating that alignment of the IT work that goes with those experiences.
Okay. One more question, then I'm going to move to Dave. Where do the product owners come from? Are they in IT? Are they in marketing? Are they in a product organization?
The product owners come from the business, and we are in the state of this is all maturing. I'm not going to sit here and tell you we're at the top level of maturity. People are really starting to grapple with what does it mean to be a product owner. I'll give you a very simple example. In the past, I think product owners or people that are doing this role might think it's just my job to come up with new feature functions from a business perspective. A product owner has to think about the technical debt that goes along with their experience, because that will actually put a drag on that experience. They have to care about the compliance of that experience, the regulatory aspect. They own it soup to nuts, just like a product owner out in any other industry would own a product. That is very different. And and it's from the business, and they're wrapping their heads around having that collective whole responsibility.
Excellent. Thank you. Dave, are you agile at scale?
No,
What is
no,
it?
we certainly are not.
So where are you with agile, and where do you, and is that where you want to be, or do you want to get to agile at scale, and what does that even mean?
Look, I think agile is a journey. Again, that's one of those words that I think is easily thrown about, and people say, "Oh yeah, we're agile." We have a cool space where we all gather around and we make decisions collectively, and we have whiteboards even where we doodle on, and therefore we're agile. You know, I have a dear friend who works at Facebook. I've seen agile at scale. It looks very different than New York Life. But we're on a journey, and I'm not disappointed where we are. But if we're in the baseball season right now, we're in the third inning probably of agile development. So we're modified waterfall.
So you and I did a blog together, and now it's in print, it's published, so I can cite it.
For better or for worse.
For
yeah,
better or for
that's
worse,
right.
where you talked about agile at scale and what that looks like with a never-ending series of releases. Can you talk about that? Can you describe that beautiful vision of agile at scale?
Yeah, see, everybody comes from a background now of a project with a defined period of time, with a defined budget, with defined resources, internal and external, attacking this particular issue with an end date and all kinds of nice little milestones along the way will report into management. Agile is a fluid evergreen. It is a evergreen process where you're just constantly modifying and doing releases without being beholden to an end date or even a fixed budget. And I think that's probably the hardest things for everybody to sort of grapple with is, well, how do I run my business? How do I run my P&L when I'm not defining exactly the expense that's going to flow through during a calendar year? If you're only going 3 months or 6 months out into your release cycle, that's a big leap of faith for business and technology leaders to get on board with and to reason with. And the ability to sort of go into a system, make some changes very rapidly, come out of that, maybe kill that off, not part of the kind of the muscle memory of an organization like ours.
Yeah, and where we're trying to flip to, and we're in the flipping mode, is trying to flip to persistent teams. We stop trying to talk about dollars, and we start talking about what is that capacity, and the goal is to make that capacity as efficient and effective as possible. In an agile world where they're working together, they're teaming together on a regular basis, you will start to get some of that lift that comes with that aspect of, and then when it comes to the project, to your point, what we have is the outcomes are tied to an experience. An experience is accountable to deliver certain outcomes that will have an impact of the P&L. Now, what we don't know, which we used to think in the past, is I know exactly the solution that's going to get me there. Now we don't know. We're going to iterate. We're going to place small bets. We're going to find out that maybe this small bet didn't start to achieve the outcome, and we're going to move on. But that experience owner at the end of the day is accountable for the business outcome. That's what drives them to continue to iterate and find those things and testing the waters of, am I spending more in the way of capacity than I should to actually deliver that outcome?
So
It's a great point because it assumes then that the consumer is going to stay static in their needs. That's what waterfall would be.
Yes, it does.
I will have fixed it and I'll be done.
right.
In an 18-month project, there's no way at the end of that you're going to have a product that is what you thought was the right thing 18 months before.
So
No way.
So, some of the phrases that come to mind are, minimal viable product, fail fast, right? This is where it's not all going to be an 18-month project where we know exactly what we're doing, we know what we're going to get, we know what we're going to spend. This is iterate, iterate, iterate. Dave, I never think of life insurance as the most risk-taking culture.
No, it's not, and there is but that's okay because that's what life insurance is in the end. Is it's trying to make sure you make the right risk-based decisions, and so you do tend to study data and you take your time at things. Rushing into things can be a killer to our organization, over a long period of time because we're grabbing onto liabilities that can have 30, 40, 50 years worth of value to the company. But that doesn't mean you can't move quickly on the customer journey side and do MVP-like models to actually get to the right place. I don't think they're in conflict with each other to actually run your business in the proper way. So how we may show up on the risk management side may be different than how we show up on the business side in terms of the customer journey. So I think they can be complementary in that regard, and I think we've cracked some of that within the organization. But we're also a group of perfectionists, and we'd like to know the budget numbers, and we'd like to know the end dates, and so there is that kind of rub that occurs.
So
that's the big discomfort for sure.
So let me ask this then, Kim. I'll ask this of you first. IT will show up to be agile. IT will do the training, they'll meet with the coaches, they'll do the sprints and be in the scrums and all of that. Sometimes business partners, well, they complain about waterfall. They do like to give requirements and then hang out and wait for delivery. They have to change the way, it's more of a change to them the way they have to work in agile than it is for IT, because IT is reinventing all the time. How have you gotten your business partners to pony up the resources and the time to get invested in Agile?
Gosh, and it's a great question, and I will tell you our specific story. Don't know that it's a repeatable recipe, but we had a bank president that actually I knew at Capital One that came in and had experienced Agile, so maybe earlier went through their I don't know if I trust this, I don't know if it's going to really deliver, became a believer, because that's what happens when they become believers, and was able to really garner the support of his business side of the organization, or partnered with IT, because honestly, Agile is nothing if it's just IT. I'm sorry, that's just little incremental delivery. Let's not call it Agile. Agile is when you show up in a room and you cannot tell who are the IT folks, who are the business folks. They are a collective team, almost like a little mini startup that's working together to deliver some kind of outcome. So it started with a bank president that said, we are going to be agile. And he brought the team. Now, once you got that kind of momentum behind it and you started to see that, hey, wow, this team was actually able to make smaller bets. So we talked about risk earlier. What's riskier? An 18-month, many millions of dollars of project to end up with something at the end that you trash, you don't want? Or placing small bets and quickly throw those away when they don't work, and at the end you actually end up with what you want. When the business starts to feel that control over, wow, I really can kind of pivot very quickly and take advantage of market conditions and changing customer needs, and I can do that in my smaller space, right? Not at a high level, kind of like a PMO that dictates down. It almost becomes contagious. And I will tell you, it started in bank, but it quickly has moved into the other organizations very quickly, because then you start to see the value of having a team. When the IT starts talking in terms of business outcomes, that's when the business starts to get hooked and said, we are all in it for the right thing together. I want more of that.
And you're speaking my language. I can relate to you because we're on the same page of it. How
Absolutely.
about for you, Dave, how did you get,
Yeah, no, pretty similar. Maybe the one nuance here is that we actually started with the business. We basically said to the business, you own it. We'll help you. We'll help with the training. We'll help with the personnel. But this has to be something that you embrace and you run first and foremost. And actually, some of the people who worked in technology shifted over to the business side, and they brought their agile skills with them and have led some of the teams. And just like Kim, at USAA, we did a very, very small project. It happened to be the first install of our new CRM platform for our agents, and just proved out how fast we could move, and said, when somebody woke up and said, wait a minute, you're in release cycle 9 and you're 24 months into this, how did that happen? And the agents are using it and they're getting benefit. Name another project that came on stream that quickly with that kind of benefit. Now everybody wants to know, what are you doing? How do I get a piece of it?
Excellent. So I'm going to pause.
You try
here.
to change the entire organization at once, you've got no shot. It just is never going to happen.
All right, audience,
We got one for you.
we got a question. Oh, this is exciting. Okay.
How do you instill accountability in cross-functional product teams?
So let me unpack that for a second. And Dave, I'm going to start with you. You know, if I report into IT, I know what my accountability is. If I have certain deadlines I have to meet. I know what my accountability is. When there's a cross-functional product team whose accountability is to build a business capability or to deliver a business outcome or to create a better customer experience, how do those teams, how do you enforce accountability? How do you create a culture of accountability around those cross-functional product teams?
You get out of the way. And what I mean by that is they're no longer directly accountable to me. They're accountable to the team, and the team leads. And they're responsible for the delivery with a matrix back, a dotted line back into me in terms of progress or issue resolution, resource needs, and the like. But you got to get the heck out of the way and allow these teams to perform. In a hierarchical organization, that's trouble. In a decentralized organization that trusts and it really understands empowerment, it works.
I mean, that you just hit the nail on the head with the get out of the way type of mentality. And again, our teams are judged performance-wise on did they achieve the business outcome. We don't have our own set of IT scorecards. Our scorecard is the business scorecard, exactly. And our teams know it. We talk about needing technology that understand business and business technologists. You got to have that type of people that really understand both sides of the equation. But that's one way. Don't give them a different set of goals. Give them the business goals. And then to your point, get out of the way. And it's easy, maybe easier for me to say, but you get some of my leaders deeper into the organization and we're trying to get pretty flat. They're like, well, what I do all day is I make sure delivery happens. No. That's a self-empowered team that's aligned with the business. They're accountable. You're helping to make sure that your team has the right talent and skills and we have the right enablers. But your job is not to deliver product X or milestone Y. That's the team.
So, I was talking to a CIO recently who said that his challenge in moving services to the cloud was that his CFO likes CapEx more than OpEx. That's a challenge. So when you move to software as a service, now you're moving more into OpEx than CapEx. CFO doesn't like that, so that's a struggle. That's one comment. Another comment is I'm doing a blog with another CIO who in IT is experimenting with removing hierarchy. That maybe in this new digital era that we're in, maybe traditional hierarchy is not the way to go. So when you're talking about creating huge fundamental changes to the fundamentals of a business, I mean, there's always hierarchy, right? You know those org charts and how they go. And then when you're talking about, changing the way shareholders are paid because, EBITDA likes CapEx more than it likes OpEx. I mean, we're talking about not technology and not agile development. We're talking about changing management practices that have been in place for 1,000,000 years. So my question.
Yeah, but I want to jump on this one.
Okay.
Sorry. I think you got to change the language. There's a reason why the CFO feels that way. Something has happened in the past which basically suggests that I've got more control over the landscape in my budget when it's CapEx versus OpEx. If you're an organization, however, that is changing the equation, the run-grow equation, start with that, which is you're killing off as much legacy as you're replacing with new, if not more, you're good to go. Meaning there's not a CFO on the planet who's not going to refuse that dynamic. They're going to look at the fact that you're taking down your fixed structure very, very rapidly and you're freeing up these dollars for new projects. They'll be more than comfortable transferring this over to OpEx.
Right. So it's like anything else. Once you put it in the right frame and you educate on what it means, you can create that change.
Well, you got to prove yourself.
Right.
Yeah, and this gets back to what I said at my opening comments around the ecosystem. You have to deal with the ecosystem. If you talk to our head of HR, they are talking about a different way of performance managing people. Talking about if you talk to it's interesting to talk to our CFO. She's the one that says, wait, we're talking again in this annualized way. We should be talking about what we call adaptive planning. We set a plan, a 3-year plan, and then we adapt it. We don't have this kind of artificial stop and end, but you've got to get the ecosystem talking in the same way or you start to have that rub. So that is such a critical, important part that this can't just live. It will never survive and thrive if it's surrounded by an ecosystem that's not also trying to make that cultural change. It won't work.
Tom, do we have a question?
We have another
All
question.
right.
Kim, you mentioned agile teams, business and IT working as mini startups. How do you prevent scope creep and keep everyone in line without blocking creativity and progress?
Well, gosh, I'm trying to think of the word scope creep in when it comes to agile, right? So by nature, you're setting up for the next sprint, and you have a certain set of work, and you do want, honestly, I mean, depending on your definition of scope creep, you come through that sprint and you say, you know what, I want more of that, or I want less of something else. That next 2-week sprint, I'm going to do something a little different than what I originally thought. Is that scope creep? I don't know. It's a perpetual thing. So I think of waterfall project where there's a begin and there's an end and there's a set cost and then there's this concept of scope creep. And the concept of if you adhere to the practices of you only have so much capacity per sprint, you can't get more out of it than that's there, and you have to prioritize and know that there's another sprint behind it. The reason scope creep usually happens is I have one shot at this. I've got between this date and this much money, and if I don't shove everything but the kitchen sink in there, I'm never going to get it. In an agile world, you'll get it the next sprint. You'll get it the sprint after. It's 2 weeks. It's not 18 months later. It really changes the whole dynamic of the concept of why we even have the scope creep.
Yeah, Kim, I think you might agree that people with Agile, when they first start, try to jam too much into the first sprint.
They do.
Because, I'm going to miss out somehow if I don't get
Yes.
it all in there. And so that actually could be a definition of scope creep in some regards. And then it's up, I think, to leaders to basically say, you're biting off way too much here. Let's narrow this down and make sure that we're just delivering against the first set, not some large piece of it. So I think there's some checkpoints along the way that we can deliver as leaders to actually make sure that it's reasonable what's being assumed.
Yes.
So on this topic of organizing for digital, we've talked about customer experience teams, which is a relatively new organizational component.
Yes.
We've talked about cross-functional product teams, similarly. Talked about business outcomes, agile development. These are all new ways of running IT so that IT is more integrated with the rest of the business and with the customer experience. Dave, when you and I'm just building on that, when you and I did our blog together, you talked about how, with the exception of architecture, little things like architecture and information security, and maybe even shared services or infrastructure, you see a future where application development resources, business analysts, all of the other IT folks who aren't running those functions should actually be in the businesses where those technologies are used. So I was giving a keynote at a financial services company to the IT team, and I quoted you, and it caused quite a stir.
Yeah. I'm sorry about that.
And what one of the senior leaders said is, okay, we get putting the development resources closer to the business community that's using them, but what about that beautiful end-to-end view that IT has across all of those systems, which nobody else really has? Do you do away with that if you're embedding technology development resources in those parts of the business? So that's my question to you.
Yeah, no, but you described it earlier. If you have good, competent architectural structures and people, you avoid that problem. If you think about your architects, maybe it's the new version of architects. We have three. We have a data architect, we have a business architect, and we have a technical architect. Those three individuals are responsible at looking across the top holistically at multiple platforms, multiple ecosystems, come up with the right decisions and create the right governance around both the intake and the demand management side of it. If you've got that working well, you can handle that. And then the other piece of about what Kim and I were talking about earlier is having it live within the business organization is exactly what Agile is. If you're actually letting go, you're basically saying people who work in technology, maybe for me directly right at this second, are no longer working for me, they're working on the outcome. And so it's already rolling in that direction. I think it's just a natural evolution. We as leaders have to get our minds around this in the right way to accept it. It's a big leap, I get it, but technology departments were brought up in the world on providing a discrete function of technology compute power 40 years ago. Technology is pervasive today. How can you have a department controlling all aspects of this with a separation from the business?
Right. And honestly, we talk about, so many businesses now are saying we're not X, we're a technology company. We're not. Well, I, in my past career, actually worked at a pure technology company. Do you think they have a separate IT organization? The whole organization is IT. Right. So you build yourself around those different capabilities, and they're not going under. They are thriving well. So it is a different mindset. Now, what you do have to think about is you do have to architect correctly, right? You need to architect for independence, because what you don't want at the end of the day is you have one group that wants to go out quick with a capability, and they're like, yeah, but you have to wait for this quarterly release because you're part of this bigger monolithic thing, and you got to go out. So a big part of this is getting your architecture compartmentalized and independence created so that you really can have that independence of capability that each experience owner really feels in control, soup to nuts, of what they need to put out into the market.
So,
and would you agree, Kim, that there are a lot of sort of starts and stops to get this right?
Oh my gosh. If I sound like the world is butterflies and rainbows and cupcakes, it's not, right? I mean, we still run on mainframe systems. I'm sorry. It is the reality. We're a financial services company. We've been around for 95 years. We have them. So there are some things that have moved very nicely into this new world, and there's other things that we're trying to adapt into the new world. But yeah, it's definitely a challenging kind of shift to be making.
Thank you. We
got
have a question, Tom. Excellent. Please.
What do you think of bimodal IT?
Bimodal IT. Dave, I'll start with you.
I love it.
You love bimodal?
It's
okay.
kind of what we're talking. It's kind of what we're talking about.
Right.
I mean, first and foremost, if you like new co, old co, that's bimodal.
Right.
The second thing is, no matter what, as Kim said, we have mainframes. I think 70% of the financial transactions through all the banking systems are in mainframes today, and that's not going away in the next 10 years. So you have to have a core compute model. You have to have a group of people who are code killers that are really worried about efficiency. And you have to have people worrying about all the new things in this new digital age. That's bimodal IT.
Kim, what do you think?
Yeah, and I've struggled with this one a little bit. I don't disagree with what you just said. It's just more, do we use different words now? As I think about, we create platforms, right, that you can build on top of. Do we think of that these things like our mainframe systems and all are really platforms that we have to create an easy way to interact with through APIs, through different mechanisms, and you create an abstraction layer that really so then again, the bimodal is maybe the platforms that you have to run get as more efficient and more efficient over time to allow to free the other type of new experiences to be able to run on top of those. So I think all of us probably to some degree are using something that by definition is bimodal, whether we're all saying, hey, I'm committed to a true bimodal model. I think in the world we live in right now, I don't think there's any way to not have some aspect of bimodal.
So let me ask a question. I know Tom's letting me know we have another question, but I'm here at the desk, so I get to do whatever I want, really. And I want to ask this question. When we talk about Agile, it's all about, or a lot of the places that companies start is the revenue-generating, customer-facing, high-value growth technologies. But we know that infrastructure innovation is incredibly important, and that in a way, if you're creating a nimble, variabilized infrastructure, you're providing as much value to your company as doing a new customer-facing tool. Not everybody at the executive committee may recognize that, but you know that. So my question, Dave, starting with you, is what is infrastructure innovation? What does that mean to you?
I think it starts with DevOps as one place to sort of look at, but you also have the entire footprint and how you shrink the footprint. Easy example perhaps is at one time everybody had data centers, and now they either have colo or cloud or some combination of the two. That is a level of innovation that has to take place. Kim mentioned we all run on mainframes, and we run on mainframes as well. How do you reduce your MIPS each and every year so that you're actually managing your infrastructure in a proper way? I think it's all about the alignment of goals. If you're telling the infrastructure people that they have a hand in this, and here are your goals, and here's how you're going to simplify the organization, you're going to get to a better level of outcomes here that actually is going to create a level of innovation. And then the last thing is they need to be at the forefront of what's happening in terms of innovation outside the four walls of the organization. Not to chase rainbows, but there's a lot of really good technology that's going on in the marketplace that we need to tap into to help us become more efficient, more scalable at what we do.
Thank you. Kim,
Yeah,
how about
absolutely.
infrastructure innovation at USAA?
And the way we think about infrastructure, gosh, we want infrastructure, and again, we really highlight and focus on those agile teams working in the experience model. How do we make them just scream when it comes to speed? Part of that is infrastructure needs to be a service. It needs to be a capability that they can use at a moment's notice, very safely, very compliantly. But infrastructure should think of themselves as, how do I make myself into a service? Obviously, AWS and other cloud providers have found ways to do this, but if for ourselves, when we think about database, right? Do I need to make a request to a database team to have certain work done? No, it should be a capability, a service that I can invoke as a developer on an agile team to get done what I need to do. That's some of the ways of thinking about the innovation that has to go into infrastructure. Otherwise, again, I look at all these different places that could be, quite frankly, boat anchors to this new way of working. You've got to address those. You can't leave them around, or at some point they will just be that last kind of friction point you can't remove.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right.
Question?
Yes, we do. We
Okay.
have a challenge question for David, it looks like.
Ooh.
Doesn't having that expanded top-level structure of multiple architects go against the spirit of Agile, which is small, fast, and flexible teams?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's one of those slow down in order to speed up mantras that are important to all organizations. If you're not properly organized, if you're not thinking about, I mean, just think about your API economy as one such example. You can go at it randomly, or you can go at it thoughtfully. And it may take more time to be planning around this and be more prescriptive about how you're doing this, but you're going to save steps in the long term. So it may be that you're a little bit more deliberate at the start. It's going to pay off at the end. So I look at it as more facilitative than anything.
I couldn't agree with you more. You think about cloud, you just don't turn that on, open it up to your developers and say, have at it, right? You have a strategy, you have a technical strategy that your architectures are helping define. What is that model? When do you use private cloud? When do you use your public clouds? You need architectural guidance in order to really do these things well. So I agree with you. Architecture is not a non-agile construct.
So I'm going to shift this now to talking about leadership development. So, you know, I've been working with CIOs since the 60s. No, I'm kidding. Since for a while now. And, you know, it has always been remarkable to me. At first, when I started working with CIOs, and CIOs were technologists, right? Maybe started out as, you know, a system configurator and then, or sysadmin, and then moved into being an MIS director. And then at some point in 1987, to be precise, the first CIO, you know, was minted in the market. And then we got away from the notion of CIOs as technologists, and then we thought about CIOs as business people, right? That's when you had ERP and business process change. And now, well, we're pushing the dial. I mean, this conversation, yeah, we've talked about, we got MIPS in there, but this has been a business conversation that we're having. So we've really pushed the dial on, I mean, when technology is the business, CIOs need to be business first. We know that. But when we're talking about APIs and microservices and architecture and do we stay on the mainframe or what do we do and all of that, there's technology in there. And I don't think it's enough to say, well, I can lead. I've got those people around me. You yourself have to know a thing or two about technology as well. So I'm just going to add one thing to it. What we've also been talking about, you know, Kim, when you mentioned, you know, the ecosystem and HR can't manage the way HR used to manage. You're also talking about changing the hearts and minds of some really old executives who have worked in the company for a really long time. That's not business process change. That's foundational paradigm shift change that we're talking about. How are you growing the leaders who are going to come in and be all that and do all that when you're ready to move into a new role or whatever? So this is the leadership. I'll start, Dave. What are the competencies that you look for in the people who are going to come and take your seat?
I'll say this first and foremost. I kind of look at my day job as a HR professional, first and foremost, with a technology orientation to it, meaning that I've got to have the right team. I can't certainly know it all, nor do I. I need the right level of engineering skills. I need good views of controls and cyber. All those things have to come together in terms of a workable team that actually is united in common purpose. Those are classic HR functions at the end of the day. Now, when you're hiring, what are you looking for? Well, you better have somebody who is actually team-minded. If the tyranny of competence that existed in the past is somebody that was so skilled at what they did from an engineering point of view, but they could not work with anybody else, and we put up with them because they were so knowledgeable. The thing that annoys me more than anything in our organization, somebody said, well, they have subject matter expertise. Well, we have a hostage crisis too. You have to have at the core people who are willing to cooperate with each other, people who are willing to share ideas, who invite criticism for others, who are intellectually curious and have excellent communication skills. Kim didn't get to where she is in this organization is today for lack of communication. Mm-hmm. She has to talk to her CEO, she has to talk to the CFO. So that ability to navigate the C-suite becomes really important. And then you get in front of the board of directors. And each one of those levels requires an enormous amount of EQ. So I would say at the end is you have to be pretty intelligent, but you have to have a very high level of EQ. And you have to look for that in the kind of people you hire.
So question for you on that. You look for the EQ, but often your most brilliant chief architect may suffer from a lack, potentially. Can you develop it?
Not often. I've not seen much success with that. I think EQ is innate in some ways. You can soften at the edges some of the problems that come about from people who really are not very good at this. But I think what you have to do is to say somebody's very, very talented and they've got a good heart. They actually are kind, but they don't have those particular skills. You have to be willing to put them in more of a individual contributor role, or you have to put them in a function that is sort of minimized in terms of their ability to be exposed, say, to the board of directors. I work, the amount of effort that goes into retooling people that are sort of one thing, and changing that in terms of I've seen it, but I don't.
So Dave is breaking up a little bit, right, toward the end there, but the point being, just to add one thing to that, I think compared to other disciplines, technology is so complicated that by the time you master the intricacies of technology, that's when you're ready maybe to move up into people management, but it can take a long time because technology is so challenging.
Yeah, but here's what I'd say to that, just to add on. I think some of the key skills, do you have, and for the longest time, what does this mean? But a growth mindset, which means you're just a natural, constant learner. The level at which you have to understand is different, but you have to be willing to always understand what's out there, what's on the forefront. What does it mean to you? What does blockchain really mean to us? You have to be inquisitive, but you have to be a master translator, is what I found. I have to be able to effectively translate between technology and the business. And that, what I have found in my career, has allowed me to continue down the track I've been on to this role is, gosh, if you're not a good translator, then it's hard to sit in this role where I think you haven't said it this way, but you are squarely on the fence between business and technology and balancing, and you've got to be a great translator. So I feel like everything that was said before about what's needed, totally agree that EQ is so critical. You got to be a master translator. You've got to have that growth mindset.
Excellent. Okay, we have one more question, do we not?
Yes, we do. So looks like we've got David back. Sorry about the Skype issue there. Do your senior leaders
Okay.
come from IT or the business?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Say it one more time.
Do your senior leaders on your senior leadership team, do you tend to bring them up through IT or do you import them from other parts of the business? That's the question, correct?
Yeah, that is it.
Okay. Dave?
Yeah, I actually come from the business side, so I'm the anomaly, if you will. But I can think of 3 leaders on my team that have both business and technical experience, but I most recently hired them from the technical management responsibility.
And one thing I'll say about USA that I've been so pleased to see, I would say almost yes to both. They've come through technology. They cross what I call cross the border. They cross borders into business. Maybe they serve in a more, there's not a lot of distinction when you go into operations side of the business. It's easy translation to make. They come back into technology. So honestly, we see a lot of people that have made that kind of journey through their career. Typically, though, they are at some point in their career had more material exposure to technology.
Got it. Okay, so I'm going to ask our final question so that I can hand us back to Tom on time. And that is, and Kim, I'll start with you. When there's a time of great change, it's really an opportunity to raise your hand, step up, show who you are, and you capitalize on opportunity for growth and recognition and career advancement. When you're shifting to customer experience product teams, you're going to be looking around for who on your team or who across the company is showing themselves to be a leader, because you're thinking about succession, everybody's thinking about succession. There are apparently there are 10,000 people watching us right now. So many of them will be up-and-comers who would love to be on your senior leadership team. What advice do you have for them in terms of skills to develop, how to handle themselves, how to capitalize on this great opportunity where when we all emerge from this digital transformation, there will be a new crop of leaders that are going to bring our companies into the future, and I bet every single one of our viewers wants to be one of those leaders. What's your advice for them?
I'll take it from my own advice. One, you've got to get a multitude of exposures. If anyone were to look at my resume, I've been with architecture, I've been with data, I've been with QA, I've been in several different roles. So I think I'm not being scared to continue to just stretch yourself into other areas. And I always tell people, if you get too comfortable in a role, switch. It's time to switch. You've got to keep stretching and molding yourself. If you're in the same role, you are not growing in any way, shape, or form. You start to, so that's one aspect. I think you can't, especially in IT, and as we're trying to do this much change, be a storyteller. Understand how to tell stories. When we go to the board, you don't talk in terms of APIs and microservices in the same way, but you create great stories, great analogies that quickly resonate, make the point, and then next thing you know, they're polling. They're wanting more of what we have to offer. So I think you have to be thinking about how do you tell your story as you go up in your career to the various parties. So I think some of that and just that ability to show you're not kind of a one-trick wonder. You absolutely have that fungibility, I think is critical to what you do in your career.
The chameleon factor.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, Dave, same question to you. No pressure, but this is the final note of our session here.
Let me see if I can bring it home. First of all, Kim's points are excellent ones. I would maybe underscore one, read everything you can get your hands on that everybody else is not reading. I just think about somebody like Jeffrey Moore as an example, somebody who thinks and operates differently. There are so many great things to learn from people like that have that kind of wisdom. The second thing is engage in outside influence. Find mentors outside of your business who will push you. Think of that as almost an intellectual personal coach where it's safe. You know, they're not in charge of your bonus and your career path and so on and so forth. So many people are relying on those internally and at the expense of the external advice. And I've gotten great advice over my longish career there. And the last is spend time with early stage companies. They are cutting edge. I mean, if I had a chance to go spend a day with Reed Hastings, I'd do it in a second. Maybe not so much Elon Musk these days, but some of the others.
I'm still a believer. Good. Okay. And now I would like to perform "I Dreamed a Dream" from Les Mis. Oh, Tom tells me we don't have time, so that's too bad. Next time. So, Kim, Dave, thanks so much for your insights. This has been terrific. I know our audience learned a lot, and we hope you'll come back and join us again someday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, we'd like to thank Martha and our guests Kim and David, as well as everyone who attended today. If you're not a member of the council and you'd like to learn more, visit us on Twitter at CIOEC or at our website at CIOExecutiveCouncil.com, where you can register for our next public webcast when we partner with our friends at IDC to present their Worldwide CIO Agenda 2019 Predictions Report on November 28th. On behalf of the CIO Executive Council, thank you for joining us and see you next time.